Good evening, everyone. Welcome to this meeting of the Planning and Development Council, the town of Oakville. Madam Clerk, do we have any regrets?
Yes, we have regrets from Councillor Giddings.
Oh, that's a shame. All right. Thank you very much. Council, are there any declarations of pecuniary interest? Thank you. Could we have a mover and seconder for Committee of the Whole? Councillor Lapworth and Councillor Dudek, all in favor? Opposed? That carries. We are resolved in the Committee of the Whole. And Council, to get us even more in the Christmas mood than we will be already from our very successful Santa Claus parade, and thank you, Councillor Demoff, for your leadership there. I understand that Councillor Knoll has some really good news about his business to share. Councillor Knoll?
Oh, thank you, Your Worship. Stop, don't ring those bells yet. Yes, thank you. I'm very pleasantly surprised by your suggestion that I make this announcement tonight. I'm always very careful to keep a bit of a firewall between my business affairs and my council job, but of course, my business actually appears to be a fairly well-regarded, well-appreciated municipal institution, it seems, because many of you probably know we were running through some very difficult times over the past several months, and the change in technologies required that we, as every theatre in the world, convert to digital. We were having a very difficult time funding that. We reached out to the community in what I call my It's a Wonderful Life campaign, and the mayor kindly reprinted the notice here. And reached out to the community and said, listen, we're really in rough shape, and we're looking for a Sam Wainwright. And you may recall Sam Wainwright's the character at the end of It's a Wonderful Life who telegrammed to George Bailey that he's going to cover all the debts that he has to cover in order to maintain the Bailey savings and loan. Well, the town of Oakville responded in such an amazing way. We raised over $50,000 in micro investments and outright donations to go towards the cost of the conversion. And in addition to that, we had a number of people approach us from the community and said, I'm a person of some means and I would like to find out more about this. Maybe I can help you. And we went through all three of those individuals, and one individual, I don't have permission to name him right now. I'd love to, because he certainly deserves recognition as well. But one individual, Oakville resident, lives in West Oak Trails, came forward, and he and his family have literally become our Sam Wainwright. And he has agreed to back Encore and to help us achieve what we need to achieve, which is a conversion to digital cinema, so that we're able to keep our Ward 2 institution alive for hopefully many, many years to come. 16 years up to this date. It was pretty terrifying to think that we'd have to finally close the doors, but it looks like we've got a new lease on life. And as I said in my little letter here to the community, I'll just read the line that the mayor mentioned to me. After the announcement, I said, returning to our favorite movies for a moment to close this email, I want to quote Zuzu, the young daughter in the movie. Teacher says every time a bell rings, an angel gets his wings. Friends, there have been a lot of bells ringing in Oakville over the past few weeks. On behalf of the staff and management of Encore Cinemas, we want to thank you for sticking with us. Your loyalty and support have been inspirational. Thank you.
Congratulations, and we're ringing our bells in your honor.
Thank you very much. It's been a real Christmas miracle, and thank you all for your support too, because I know that some of you have contributed and all of you have provided your moral support. I really appreciate it. It's been an amazing period of time. Thank you.
Merry Christmas.
Thank you.
Now, Council, the consent items before you tonight are numerous. There's 5 of them. How do you wish to deal with your consent items? Councillor Johnston is moving the consent items. Councillor Elgar, what would you like to do?
Since a majority of them are in Ward 4, Roger and I thought maybe Ward 4 should do it instead of...
Councillor Elgar is moving the consent items. Or would you like Councillor Lapworth to move them? All right, then by default, you get them, Alan. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? The consent items are carried. There are no confidential consent items, but we do have a public hearing item, and this is the public meeting report for the zoning bylaw amendment and official plan amendment for Garden Drive Towns at 113 to 131 Garden Drive. And this is, as Lee will explain, but I love to do this one too. This is not a decision item tonight. This is a public input item tonight. And the information received by telephone, letter, email, voicemail, and the meeting tonight will be taken into account by planners as they develop their recommendation report for council at a later time. Lee?
Good evening, members of council. This evening, you can find my report on page 25 of tonight's agenda. This is the statutory public meeting for an official plan amendment and a zoning bylaw amendment submitted by Garden Drive Towns for the development of 20 townhouses fronting onto Garden Drive. The purpose of tonight's meeting is to obtain any further input from the public related to this application. And planning staff are at this point not recommending approval or denial, just that the council receive the report. The site is located on the east side of Garden Drive between Rebecca Street and Lakeshore Road and is municipally known as 113 to 131 Garden Drive. The property is approximately 0.39 hectares in size and has 91 meters of frontage on Garden Drive. There's quite a bit of planning history on the site. In May of 2005, staff initiated the Maurice Drive land use study and policy study. The purpose of the study was to look at existing and potential land use options for the area bounded by Maurice Drive, Lakeshore Road, Dorval, and Rebecca Street, and the subject lands were part of that study. In 2007, the OMB approved OPA 266, which had the effect of creating 3 development blocks. The subject lands owned by Garden Drive represent a portion of one of the development blocks, and the balance of the block is owned by another developer, and we have met with them about a potential development application. And then in 2013, Garden Drive submitted this current application. This shows the development block for the study area. The subject lands is located and shown in red. An official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment was submitted in April of this year, and it represents a portion of the block, and it was deemed complete in May of this year. In terms of surrounding land uses, we have 6 3-story townhouses known as West Oakville Downtown Homes. We have the 4-story 99-unit Van Dyke Windermere Place development, the memory care development, which was the 4-story 60 special needs retirement building, which was recently approved by council, the Grandview Living development, which is a 4-story building with 33 residential units. These are just elevations that have been provided by the applicant with relationship to the development. As of last week, the applicant did submit some revised applications. Staff has not had an opportunity yet to review those. In terms of context, this is a development with the memory care 4-story building on the right of your screen and the 3-story townhouses on the left side of your screen. In terms of the proposal, there's 2 blocks of townhouses that are connected on the 2nd floor for a total of 20 units. It's a 3-story with access to a rooftop amenity area. The driveway is located below grade with an underground garage. Private terraces are proposed over top of the lane, and there's a landscape buffer proposed. The application originally contemplated a potential severance of land to the abutting landowners to the east. As of Friday of this past week, the applicant has indicated that they will not be pursuing that severance. If the severance were to have taken place, the density for the subject lands would be approximately 69 units per site hectare. The lands, if it stays within the current holding, would be at 58 units per site hectare. This drawing also represents or illustrates the ramp concept, the below-grade tandem parking, and 5 visitor spots. In terms of livable Oakville, the site is designated as residential and medium density, which has a density cap at 50 units per site hectare. The lands are subject to policy 27.2.1 in the official plan, which states that multiple attached dwellings are permitted with a maximum height of 3 stories. The lands can be redeveloped once the lands within the development block have been acquired, and when there's adequate water and wastewater to service the site. The development would also be subject to urban design guidelines. The applicant is proposing to amend the official plan. Under the medium density residential designation, the density cap is 50 units per site hectare. The proposal, with the land staying in the current holding, comes to 58 units per site hectare. The building does appear to be 4 stories. However, the applicant has confirmed that the rooftop area is not habitable space, but more a rooftop amenity area. The official plan amendment, if it were to be approved, will also look at phasing of the development, since the applicant is only contemplating developing portion of the site. The lands are zoned R8, subject to special provision 809, and they're also subject to a holding provision. The special provision permits multiple attached dwellings subject to a number of regulations, and the holding provision has been placed on the lands at the request of the region and the town. The regional requirements deal with servicing of the land, and the town requirements deal with the consolidation of land, a block plan, also a block plan being submitted, traffic impact study. The applicant, as of Friday, has indicated to staff that they will not be looking to lift the holding provision at this time. The applicant is proposing to modify the special provision. They want to reduce the northerly side yard from 2 meters to 1.2 meters. There is an error in the staff report. The lot frontage under the existing zoning is 5 meters. The applicant is looking for a reduction to 4 meters, and the staff report did say 3.8, so there's a correction there. Matters to be considered as part of the recommendation report to be brought forward to council in the new year. We'll be looking at the land use compatibility, density, height, and coordination of these lands with the other lands in the remaining development block, the appropriateness of the zoning in terms of the unit size and function. And we'll also be looking at some urban design issues in conformity with the site-specific urban design and any comments received from this meeting. Our next steps then is to complete the review and to look at the revised materials that were submitted late last week and to bring forward a recommendation to council. In conclusion, staff are putting forward this recommendation for your consideration, and I'm available to answer any questions.
Thank you. Any questions? Councillor Dudek.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. I'm glad you've sort of identified the 3-story townhouses and that it appears to be a 4-story when you look at the pictures. I guess I'm sort of troubled why we would go away from the 3-story that we have. We went through quite a lot of planning process in order to have the 4 stories around, 3 stories in the center. You mentioned something about it being amenity space and it will not be inhabitable, but it's still, the height is considerably more. What is the height difference between what is permitted and what they're proposing?
I don't have the number for you, but the additional area that's at the top of the building will have an elevator shaft and a stairwell. It's not dissimilar to, if you think of the memory care development where they had mechanicals at the top, they had their elevator shaft and they had a stair shaft up there as well. It's just the way it's been designed, it just looks like a story, but there isn't any habitable area in that area.
Thank you.
Any other members of council? Are there any members of the public with information for council on this matter? Thank you. I guess I would just ask, I hope that when we get to the recommendation stage, will we see, if we're going to see a recommendation in support of this application, are we going to see carefully specified reasons for why we would be departing from our OP in this area with regard to density and height?
Through your worship, any recommendation that would come forward, if staff were looking to approve the application, would include reasons why, and a full analysis of the planning merits of the application.
Okay, because to amplify what the councillor said, council expended a lot of energy, time, and resources on the OP in this area, so we're looking for a good reason to depart from what we achieved there, I think would be the kindest way I could put it. Thanks very much. All right, councillors, a motion? Councillor Dudek moves receipt of the information. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Then that brings us to our first discussion item, item number 7 on the agenda, and that is the recommendation report for the zoning bylaw amendment and draft plan of subdivision phase 2A of Davis Minority. And if you'll give your attention to the podium, we will learn from Trish what the summary of this is for the public.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor Burton and members of council. The purpose of this presentation on report 112-13 found on page 51 of your agenda is to provide a comprehensive review of the applications and a recommendation on the proposed zoning bylaw and plan of subdivision submitted by Davis Minardi Home Corporation. In February 2005, Davis Minardi Home Corp. And Dunbridge Developments Incorporated submitted a zoning bylaw amendment and draft plan subdivision application for lands on the northeast corner of Neagawa Boulevard and Dundas Street West, and the smaller parcel on the west side of Neagawa Boulevard that is the subject lands for this application. The applications were subsequently appealed to the Ontario Municipal Board. With the approval of the North Oakville East Secondary Plan in 2008, the applicant revised the original proposal to reflect the approved secondary plan. These amendments were made in the context of the existing appeals which remain at the OMB. The revised draft plan of subdivision was reduced in size from approximately 68 hectares to 59 hectares as referred to as Phase 1, which is this piece here. The lands subject to this application, west of Neagawa, were removed from the draft plan at that time, as well as a smaller piece to the east, right here, that is known as Phase 2B, which will be coming forward in the new year. A revised zoning bylaw amendment and draft plan of subdivision was submitted in February of 2012 to permit Phase 2A as a residential plan of subdivision. The plan was further revised in February 2013 to permit 122 residential dwellings, including 52 semi-detached and 70 townhouses on 6.3 hectares, as well as a center median within the road cross-section for Street A was added. The plan of subdivision also includes blocks containing a woodlot, which will be zoned natural heritage system, and stormwater management block. A zoning bylaw amendment application was submitted to rezone the lands from existing development to a Neagawa urban core zone and natural heritage system. The OMB appeal has recently been withdrawn with respect to this portion of the lands. The lands are located on the west side of Neagawa Boulevard, south of Burnham Thorpe Road and King's Christian College. The subject lands are located at the southern edge of the Neagawa urban core area. A significant woodlot is present on the lands and is designated a natural heritage system. Land use permissions on the lands allow for medium density residential uses with a density range of 25 to 75 units per hectare. The plan of subdivision densities are approximately 40 units per site hectare as proposed. The focus of the more intense mixed-use development will be at the intersection of Neagawa and Burnham Thorpe. Here. And the intent of the core area at Neagawa and Burnham Thorpe is to permit the provision of convenience, commercial, institutional, and employment uses to serve adjacent neighborhoods as well as residential development. The proposed densities on the subject lands contribute to the vitality of the larger urban core area that will include local transit service, community parks, natural heritage system, and institutional, commercial, and residential uses, with the addition of a building presence along Neagawa Boulevard. This neighborhood will be within close proximity to future services and activity areas. The master plan identifies the lands as Neagawa Boulevard Urban Core and Natural System area. There is also an avenue transit corridor, which has been included as Street A on the draft plan of subdivision that contributes to the larger road network. The proposal was reviewed for general consistency and determined to be generally reflective of the master plan. The North Oakville East Secondary Plan sets out the requirements for the design of the development within all areas. These policies address streetscaping, building locations, parking, and landscaping, among other design elements. Conditions of draft plan approval are included to address and implement these various matters. We're bringing forward the new format for the master list of conditions for final subdivision approval as part of this application and the Green Ginger application, which is next on the agenda. These conditions have been reduced in number, simplified in terms of timing and how to fulfill the condition. Duplicates and redundancies have been removed, and a number of conditions have been transferred into a supplemental appendix that will be incorporated into the new standard subdivision agreement. The subject lands are zoned existing development in the North Oakville zoning bylaw. The applicant proposed Neagawa Urban Core, NUC-1, and Natural Heritage System zones when the application first came in for the subject lands. However, through the review of the application, it was determined that the general urban GU zone permissions could be applied to this site, and that several additional regulations were required to address the double frontage lots along Neagawa Boulevard. Setback requirements to create an active street presence, and minor built form restrictions that are now tailored to this development. The majority of the subdivision will be zoned in accordance with the Neagawa Urban Core zone. A zoning bylaw amendment has been prepared to rezone the lands to Neagawa Urban Core Zone NUC 25, Stormwater Management Facility SMF, and Natural Heritage System. The proposed NUC 25 zoning bylaw amendment permits slight alterations to the general urban zone with regards to regulating front and rear yard setbacks, private garage projections, and the extent to which a porch may be enclosed. The proposed zoning bylaw 2013-127 is included on this agenda. A few of the more significant features or details of this application include servicing allocation for 112 single dwelling equivalents, which was approved as part of the 2008-2009 Regional Water and Wastewater Servicing Allocation Program to supply the subject development of 52 semi-detached and 70 townhouses. Allocation from the 2012 program was not required. The application is generally consistent with the intent of the master plan and the approved implementation documents, including urban design guidelines, typical road and trail cross-sections, North Oakville Trails Plan, and the North Oakville Urban Forestry Strategic Management Plan. The proposal includes a mix of medium-density housing that will support the future Neagawa Urban Core mixed-use development area to the north. The proposed housing in this parcel of land either fronts onto or is within walking distance to the east-west transit corridor that will be constructed as part of this development, adding another link to the developing road network in North Oakville. Pedestrian and cycling connectivity will also be improved as new facilities are constructed and planned connections made, providing for a well-connected neighborhood that is not solely reliant on the private automobile. Finally, the protection of the woodlot and contributing to the overall natural heritage system is achieved through zoning the feature natural heritage system and is included in the bylaw. The recommendation for this application, that the zoning bylaw amendment and draft plan of subdivision applications submitted by Davis Menardi Corporation be approved. That subject to the withdrawal of related appeals from the Ontario Municipal Board, the Director of Planning Services be authorized to grant draft plan approval of the draft plan of subdivision submitted by Davis Menardi Corporation and prepared by Bousfields, subject to the conditions contained in Appendix A of the staff report. That bylaw 2013-127 be passed, and that in accordance with Section 3417 of the Planning Act, Council deems that the changes to the proposed zoning bylaw 2013-127 are minor, and that no further public notice is required with respect to the proposed zoning bylaw. Thank you. That concludes my presentation.
Thank you very much, Trish. And let's look for questions first from the home ward. Nothing? Any others? Any members of the public with information for council on the matter? Council, is there a motion? Councillor Knoll.
Your Worship, thank you. I've been involved with monitoring the progress of this application, and I'm totally satisfied, as I believe my colleague is as well, with making the motion to approve the staff recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor, and your colleague. All of those in favor? Opposed, if any? That is carried. That brings us now to item 8, the recommendation report for the zoning bylaw amendment and plan of subdivision for Green Ginger, which you heard Trish explain is related, and that's why we have Gabe Charles now.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This presentation relates to a recommendation for plan of subdivision and zoning bylaw amendment for Green Ginger Developments, Inc. What I would note for council is that you'll have a memo on your desk this evening with the revised or slightly revised zoning bylaw amendment. It was slightly tweaked to pick up some minor changes to the bylaw that we noted after publishing. The proposal, as I noted, for a plan of subdivision has been reviewed in the context of the overarching vision for North Oakville, which looks to create an urban community, compact, pedestrian-oriented, with a broad range of housing opportunities, which is planned around the NHS. The proposal includes 444 townhouse units, which doesn't include the higher density blocks in purple or the hatching right along Dundas Street. It includes a cultural heritage resource, the James Appleby House, which will be or is intended to be relocated to just south of the Village Square, which is identified in the lime green color. The Village Square is located within the center of the community. It is intended to be the focus of this community, centrally located to be a 5-minute walk from the extremities of the new community that's being created. It includes 2 new major streets. Street C, the east-west street, is the extension of 16 Mile Drive, which begins over at Nayagawa Boulevard. It also includes the extension of Oak Park Boulevard northerly from Dundas Street. The dark green is a new stormwater management pond, and the medium green color is the natural heritage system. The proposal is located just north of Dundas Street, just west of Trafalgar Road. This is the first subdivision in North Oakville, which is located within the Trafalgar Urban Core area. The official plan designates the lands as Trafalgar Urban Core. The far west edge, the part of that area is within the neighborhood area. There's the Village Square identified, natural heritage system, as well as on the other schedules in the official plan, the road network. The proposal is generally consistent with the master plan. It identifies the layout of the road network as well as the NHS. It identifies the location for the storm pond, and the triangle that you see in the middle is the Village Square, again centrally located within the subdivision. The school and neighborhood park, the closest proximity is just west of the proposal, which is outlined in blue, to the area which is green and the off pink, which is on the adjacent properties. The existing zoning is, as it is, the existing development zone. That zoning is intended to be modified to identify the Trafalgar Urban Core. And the Trafalgar Urban Core, the TUC 18 that you see there, is written to ensure that it is only townhouse dwellings which would be permitted. There is a specific zone right for the James Appleby House to recognize some flexibility for the use of that future building, or the future placement of the building. The zoning also includes the Village Square, the NHS, and the stormwater pond. Several features associated with this subdivision. As I noted, the location of the Village Square, as well as the modified grid to this subdivision, which promotes the features of sustainability in terms of transit connectivity, compact development, it's walkable, Energy Star compliant, preservation of natural features. The housing and density targets will be met through the townhouse development as well as the future higher density development along Dundas. And as I know, the preservation of cultural heritage resource and NHS features. The recommendation is outlined in front of you, and a note to resolution number 3 that the bylaw 2013-113 be passed as revised. If there's any questions, I'd be pleased to answer those.
Thank you very much, Mr. Charles. Councillor Knoll.
Thank you, Worship. Through you to Mr. Charles, I wanted to just be clear on the Appleby House itself. The dwelling is currently designated in its existing location. Does that designation travel with the bricks and mortar to the new location, or will we have to go through a designation process again once it's been transplanted?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, there is a process associated with the moving of the house. There are conditions in the draft plan conditions attached to the staff report which identify some of those.
I was looking at the conditions. I didn't see anything specifically about the designation under the Heritage Act. Would we be pursuing redesignation, or does the designation remain on the house?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, it's getting slightly out of my area of expertise, so
Okay.
I'll turn to the senior manager.
Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Councillor Knoll. The designation will definitely stay in place. The legal description of the property will be the one thing that will be changed. So it'll be then focused on the individual parcel itself.
Should there be something in the draft plan that actually specifies that the designation will remain in place so that there's no confusion later on?
I believe in my look at the conditions, I'm satisfied that
Okay.
we'll have that under control.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
I'll look to you then for that as we move forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other questions for staff? Any members of the public with information or questions for council on this matter? Thank you. I have a small question. When was this application received?
The application was mid-2012.
And when was it declared complete?
It would have been right around that time as well, about a month or so afterwards.
All right, thanks very much for that. I'll look for a motion then. Councillor Grant?
As with the previous application, both Councillor Knoll and I have been paying close attention to this, and I will pass the bylaw as revised.
Thank you for that motion. All those in favor? Opposed, if any, and that does pass. And we can now turn to item 9, the Heritage Register update and final assessment. And if you'll give Carolyn your attention, she'll summarize this for the public and our general assistance.
Thank you, Your Worship, and members of council. So this item is regarding an update to the Heritage Register. Just to go through the background on this process, originally council directed staff to review the register back in November 2012. And after that, we took a report to the Heritage Oakville Committee regarding the Heritage Register, the types of properties that are on it, and different ways that municipalities in Ontario deal with the Heritage Register. And it then became part of the Heritage Work Plan initiative for 2013. So as part of that, staff started to review the current register and looked at possibly removing some properties from the Heritage Register to ensure that all of the properties that were on there were consistent and the reasons why they were on there were consistent as well. So we did that through spring and summer of this year. And then we took a report back to the Heritage Oakville Committee in August of this year and recommended, or we basically looked at a recommendation of about 95 properties that we thought could potentially come off, but we wanted to work further with the Heritage Oakville Committee, so we recommended the working group be formed, and that was done in that fall. So Heritage Planning staff worked with the working group to then further analyze this group of properties to determine whether or not these properties should come off the Heritage Register. So finally, we took a report back to Heritage Oakville with the final recommendation of removals. It came down to about 87 properties, and then these properties were the final recommendation made by Heritage Oakville members in the working group as well as the staff. So now here we are today. Under the Heritage Act, we are required to have council approve the removal of any properties from the Heritage Register. So that's what we're looking for today. And the criteria to remain on the register, these are the criteria that we wanted to ensure were in place, that we knew that there was a consistency across all of the properties in the Heritage Register. So we looked at first the criteria that they had to have strong potential to be designated under Part 4 of the Heritage Act. Secondly, if they just had potential to be designated Part 4 but needed further investigation, they could also remain on the Heritage Register. Thirdly, they could be a monument or structure worthy of protecting as part of a landscape or a streetscape, but not necessarily worthy of Part 4 designation. And the fourth one was worthy of salvage. These are properties that might have some material that could be salvaged for other uses in other heritage properties, but aren't necessarily worthy of being designated. And then a fifth criterion came out of the work that staff did with the working group, and that was the potential for the property to be designated as part of a Tuxedo Park Heritage Conservation District in the future. I'll get into that a little bit more on the next slide, but out of this we came up with about 87 properties that we proposed for removal, and these are the 87 properties that we're proposing this evening. So as part of the Heritage Conservation District review, we looked at different areas that could have potential for Heritage Conservation District in the future. We hadn't initially intended to do this full research as part of the Heritage Register update, but it came out of the work with the working group. And the working group evaluated all these areas along with staff and found that there was one area that is a very strong candidate for a Heritage Conservation District in the future. So we looked at retaining all of the properties within that area on the Heritage Register, whether or not they met any of the other criteria. So that's why we added that as a 5th criterion. At this point, we're not recommending anything with the Tuxedo Park. We're just recognizing that it has a strong potential for the future to be looked at as part of a future heritage planning work plan. So just to conclude, not all properties on the Heritage Register still will necessarily be designated. As noted, some may just be on there for salvage or other reasons, or we may find through doing further research that they're not necessarily worthy of designation. This will allow us to do more proactive designations under Part 4 of the Heritage Act, because we will be dealing more with proactive designations rather than reactive through demolition requests. And it provides consistency in the register so that all the properties on there are meet one of the criteria. And the next step is just for us to notify owners. If council does approve the removal of the 87 properties tonight that you see in your agenda, we will send out a letter just letting the property owner know that their property has been removed from the register, just as we did when we added properties to the register. So the staff recommendation is that the removal of the properties listed in Appendix A of the report be approved. And again, those are the 87 properties we spoke of. And that concludes my presentation, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. I think you've got at least one from Councillor Byrd.
What's the status of Appendix B? Now that you've got Appendix A, but Appendix B is, these are the ones that remain?
Ooh, let me just look. Oh, through you, Your Worship. These Appendix B are just the inventory sheets of the 87 properties. So Appendix A is just the list that lists all of them. It's just a spreadsheet that lists all 87 properties. Appendix B is 87 pages of inventory sheets for each of those properties. We just wanted to provide a picture and a map and just more information on each property.
So, okay, it just expands on the Appendix A, giving the reasons, I guess, why some were listed or were never listed, which are now going to go into the not listed category.
That's correct. These are all properties that were formerly listed, and now we're recommending through our review of the Heritage Register that they be removed and no longer be listed on the Heritage Register.
Thank you.
Thank you for your question, Councillor Byrd. Other questions? Are there any members of the public with questions or information? I beg your pardon?
Sorry, Councillor Dudek.
I'll come back to her. Let me just finish my question. Any members of the public with information or questions for council on this matter? Thank you. Councillor Dudek.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm pleased to move this, and I believe if Councillor Giddings was in attendance as well, he'd be able to add his voice to our appreciation to staff for the huge amount of work they've undertaken to sort of amalgamate the list and sort of fine-tune it, for lack of a better word. And the fact that they worked with the committee members was extremely well received in terms of facilitating a, what shall I say, congenial outcome in regards to our meeting, that it basically, the work had been done prior to us having the meeting. So well done, and thank you for all your work.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other discussion? All those in favor? Opposed, if any? And that does also carry. That brings us to item number 10, the South Central Public Land Study OTMH site update, which was distributed separately from the agenda. Commissioner?
Mayor and members of council, we have no formal presentation on this report. Just to note, council had requested that we report back on the South Central study in June of 2014. The purpose of this report is really twofold. First, it's to present the details of the information that we would require in order to be able to meet that June 2014 timeframe, which we're not able to do, and to set out a timeframe in which we could provide for the information that council was looking for. much later than the June 2014 timeframe. The second purpose of the report was to deal with the overall timing of the facility itself, and it's a budget, it's in the capital budget at a 2020-2021 timeframe. And so the report deals with actually the ability to construct that facility at a sooner timeframe, which has some potential, but at this point in time, more reasonable timeframe is the timeframe that's in the budget when you consider both the financing, constructability, and resourcing of staff. So the report is there in front of you. The recommendation is that we continue to proceed as we had outlined in the previous reports. In the interim, until council deals with this again in about 2016, the official plan policies that currently apply to the Oakville site will continue to apply to that site. And at that time, we'll bring back to council when we have some of the details of the actual site that could develop with the detailed work that is done, details of the site plan that I think the community was looking for, so that council has that level of detail and certainty in what could actually occur on the site. So if there's any questions, the director and myself would be more than happy to answer.
Thank you, Commissioner. Questions, Council? Councillor Demoff.
Thanks for the report, and I follow what you're saying on it. One of the concerns I know that I had that night that we dealt with this was the density that is being put on the corner was the concern that the residents had. And to go down too far down the road in having a community center, if we have to maintain that density, it just doesn't seem to make a lot of sense. If that is the density we have to have on that corner, I think got the sense the community didn't expect that night at the meeting. And I certainly have concerns that we're pushing, that maybe the community center would have been viewed differently if they'd known they were going to have that density on that area. So how much work is being done ahead of time before 2016? Are we committed to that density on the corner, I guess is my first question.
So through your worship to Councillor Demoff, Council's endorsement was in principle to provide what I'll call flexibility for changes to the official plan, which would include the density. So I wanted to, through the report, convey that the current provisions, policies of the Livable Oakville Plan apply to the extent that it's 29 units per site hectare. So depending on the actual area that's available, that is the current approved density that applies to the site that could be developed. What we had established through a conceptual plan was that there could be possibly some areas where only one form of housing would be available. So it's hard to describe with words, but basically if you had one corner of the site available, then that may not provide the flexibility within the 29 units that would provide for an appropriate development, given that we talked about the range of housing types. So we were seeking with the recommendation to council to say, conceptually we saw a plan that could provide for more units. That's certainly not what was endorsed. It was endorsed in principle to provide flexibility with those other parameters. So at this point in time, there's no changes to the OP. I think the intent of this report is to say we don't know what that residual land piece will be. We don't know the size of it or the configuration or where it will be located exactly on the site or what other constraints may apply given the other elements that have been described in terms of heritage retention, site contamination. We will have all of that information in a certain period of time at which we can go back to the community, it's our intention, and say here is the residual land piece we have available. Let's now look at that and determine through community consultation what is appropriate and whether or not any changes to the official plan are in fact needed. Because remembering the other change to the official plan was with respect to a medical office, which isn't actually a permitted use currently in the approved plan. So we wanted that ability to have flexibility if we need to change the plan. So I have, the commissioner and myself have had meetings with representatives from the residents associations, and as late as this evening we've been talking about actually what that flexibility means, and I can commit that we're going to have discussions between now and when we get to that point about what that could mean for the community. So we're getting to a better place.
So what does that flexibility mean?
That's the discussion that we're going to continue to have. But I can say to you that right now, it is not an approved policy. There is no flexibility right now. It's 29 units per site hectare.
But that's without a community center there, right?
No, that would be whatever the residual land piece is. If you applied the policies of livable Oakville today, you could only develop up to 29 units per site hectare.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Bird.
Yeah, the only, well, if we take the apartment building off that was under, I guess, 2 official plans ago, that's the one on Shedden Avenue. On the whole site, it strikes me the only residential building that's still in situ is the former nurses, which is now being operated as the administration building, got converted. That's at the one in the corner of Allen and McDonald. Okay, that was nurses' quarters or apartments. What would be that density if that remained at that location? Does that satisfy some of the variance in the official plan that you're talking about? If that was converted back, as that building remains and goes back to its former use as a residential building?
So through your worship to Councillor Bird, that's exactly the type of potential that could occur with the site moving forward. The intention right now is to demolish, I would assume, the majority of the hospital buildings. But in going through the steps that are outlined in the report, there's a considerable amount of work that has to be done to look at that and to look at the what could remain and couldn't remain. And so if in fact it were determined that that was a structural building that could remain, which through our community consultation was not one of the recommendations, that could be an element to be redeveloped that would require changes to the plan potentially. So that again would come through community consultation. So at this point what we're saying is the livable Oakville policies are in place. They provide for the uses that are permitted and they provide for the density that's permitted. Council endorsed looking at some flexibility as we go forward and some other parameters. But that's exactly the point, that we could end up with potentially a site, as an example, on the northwest corner, which would be of a certain size, and would it be appropriate with an entire community center and a small portion left to do, say, 6 or 7 single-family development lots? The answer may be yes, the answer may be no. It may be more appropriate to do, as we provided for in the consultation, some form of medium density. And if that's the case, what would that look like and what density would that actually be? So until we know the land area that we're actually dealing with, those are the kind of questions we want to be able to go to the community.
But the
and have
residual
discussion.
land that could be converted to residential, then look at the surrounding, where those buildings are located. Well, the only one that I know of that's residential was the former Lawson Nurses building. It's still there. I would think the bones are still there. I mean, it got converted to offices. It strikes me it could probably go back to apartments fairly readily. I don't know how many units were in there. I'm thinking maybe 25 or 30. That's there. Other than that, we get into this issue of compatibility with the surrounding buildings. Now, the only other things that buildings in the area that would be considered multi-residential would be on Reynolds Street, Reynolds and McDonald area there. Across the way there is some 3-story condo apartments. So it's very difficult. And of course the field is how you're interpreting how many units you have to fit on, how much space is left over for residential. Then we now trying to you're basically looking at a tower to fit everything what you're talking about. So I'm glad the flexibility, because there's a lot of concern. I don't know if Mr. Mullins got results of the, I guess, preliminary results of the questionnaire that went around in the neighborhood, but it's giving a pretty good feedback or guideline of what, in collaboration with the residents, what can and can't, from their point of view, fit on the site, and we all declare victory and go home. But there's somewhere along the line that the feeling here we were developing this site using a different matrix, I guess, than how we developed the DNT lands, because it appeared that the type of buildings that were residential, I guess it's all residential in that location, were respecting what was in the surrounding area, at least around the perimeter. And of course, in this case, the perimeter is basically a very small part of where residential really is in an institutional. So it's a lot of verbiage in here with that, but hopefully that we're getting to the collaborative stage with the residents to come up with a plan that everybody can agree to.
And I think through your worship to Councillor Bird, that's the intent in moving forward.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bird. Others? Are there members of the public with information or questions for council on this matter? We have a registered delegation from David Mallon, the chair of the Trafalgar Chartwell Residents Association. Mr. Mallon, welcome. Council looks forward to your information.
Thank you, Your Worship. If I may also recognize Janet Haslett-Thiel, who of course is the president of Joshua Creek Residents Association.
I could just get whoever's talking to be on microphone, everything will be great.
Beg your pardon. Although I am, as you say, sir, with TCRA, tonight I speak on behalf of the Coalition of Residents Associations, and the Coalition consists of Chartwell Maple Grove, Joshua Creek, and Lakeside Residents Associations, as well as Trafalgar Chartwell. Last Wednesday evening, town staff met with our combined residents associations at staff's request to discuss this matter at some length. I'm pleased to report that our meeting was informative and I believe helpful to all concerned. I would like to make it clear, our coalition is committed to working with council and staff to seek a mutually satisfactory solution to the redevelopment of the hospital and the high school lands, repurposing to present a solution, a satisfactory solution, both to public and to council. We do really want to try and work with folks to come to a good solution. Our meeting addressed firstly the issue of schedule and secondly the issue of density. I'd like to deal firstly with the issue of schedule. Town staff advised there were 3 constraints affecting schedule on the 2 sites. For the minute we talk about 2 separate sites, though of course they do have common, reasonably common redevelopment goals. These are, number 1, the first issue relating to schedule, issues which need to be resolved prior to final design. In particular, the unknowns related to site assessment. There are known unknowns and unknown unknowns, etc., but once you start going below ground to look at things like old oil tanks, there really is an unknown area in terms of how much contamination is present and what remedial works are required. We do understand this. This will quite likely affect the schedule, and a reasonable amount of time has to be allowed to deal with this issue, and we recognize that. Point number 2, financial issues related to the 10-year capital plan and other town capital projects currently scheduled. This is a constraint, we realize it is. However, we would make one comment here. We are advised that the revenue assumptions from the sale of the school properties, and I speak here of Chisholm and Brentwood and possibly Lynbrook, are not in the budget until 2020-2021. This appears to be unnecessarily conservative, given that 2 of the sites are vacant and Lynbrook is a little bit up in the air. But Chisholm and Brentwood, things could progress at an early date. This would obviously help the capital budget and perhaps potentially assist in bringing forward construction of the community centre. 3, staff resources to provide the project management and oversight required for satisfactory project execution was the 3rd item we discussed in schedule. That's an internal matter to the town and we offer no comment. However, as a result of these constraints, particularly the first one relating to site assessment and condition, staff have advised us that they're unable to meet the 2014 original report requirement. schedule from council, as in fact they will not have the required information to accurately define the available land for residential development until probably about 2017, depending on how quickly things go, how much contamination there is, and how extensive the cleanup has to be. If everything's squeaky clean, then obviously we would expect there would be considerable improvements on that date. But being realistic, if there are some problems there, it may be, in fact, stressing those dates. So, whilst we understand these constraints, our coalition urges prompt action to proceed with school properties repurposing. We would suggest that Chisholm and Brantwood can proceed without delay, and we request that the time make timely decisions with regards to which development model to utilise. And this is a question of how far does the town want to take the disposition of the sites. Do you sell them as is now, or do you take the process of developing those sites, site design, etc., all the way as far as potentially servicing individual lots and then selling individual lots? And we realize this is a value decision for the town, but it doesn't look to us like it needs a whole lot of time to figure this one out, and we suggest we could move ahead and get on quite quickly with disposition of these properties and redevelopment. The coalition would also like to minimize the construction period for the development of these school properties. Unfortunately, we have seen the high school properties sit for many years, and we don't want that to happen with these other school properties. We'd like to see some development occurring fairly quickly, keep the construction period to a reasonable minimum so that the mess and the inconvenience to the residents is minimized. Early movement on these two properties would also enhance the revenue available for timely implementation of the community centre project. More cash available earlier. Secondly, we would like to suggest that every effort be made to expedite the site assessment work required on the old high school property. This is where the community centre will be situated. The school property has existed in its present state, which I would describe as more or less abandoned, for approximately 20 years, if my memory serves me. Whilst we realise that the site will not be owned by the town until 2016, this hardly seems reason for delay. So we would urge cooperation between Halton Healthcare Services, Halton Public School Board, to the extent they're still involved, and the town in order to get the site assessment started. Sooner it gets started, sooner it gets finished, sooner as we can get on with the community centre. We further ask that the town seriously assess the schedule for the community centre, since another 4 years of waiting seems hardly an aggressive schedule, particularly if closure of the Centennial Pool is likely at an early date, and the new pool would need to be built in this new community centre. Town has made provision during this process for public consultation. Coalition requests that public consultation precede design analysis activity so that design options put forward by the community can be included in the mix of options to be considered. There is a sense that once the town has prepared design options, that the community really has not a whole lot of input because there isn't a whole lot there to choose between. And maybe it might be better if we could move the process so that public input can occur at an earlier date in the process. The second part of the discussion we had was the residential development on the remaining portion of the Memorial Hospital property. Our coalition submitted 3 principles which we propose be followed in repurposing the OTMH lands designated residential. Number 1, the coalition recognizes the need and the justification for intensification in general and specifically in southeast Oakville. The coalition believes the appropriate location for this significant intensification is Midtown, not OTMH lands. The community surrounding the hospital is an established community of approximately 14 units per site hectare density and encompasses a heritage district and many older character homes. In the official plan, intensification will already occur to some extent, since the density allowable in this area would be 29 units per site hectare, roughly a doubling of the existing residential density. Number two, development must respect the density currently designated in accordance with livable Oakville. That is, low-density residential with some medium-density uses permitted, but no high density. Coalition does recognize that an OPA, official plan amendment, will be required in 2018 to change the designation of the lands to permit a local health integration network or health facility on the lands. However, the official plan at the current time clearly states that these institutional lands may be redeveloped in accordance with the permitted low-density designation, may also include uses permitted in medium-density residential designation. This is a direct quote from Livable Oakville, section 26.1.4, subsection A. This would limit the number of units on the land available for residential development to 29 units per site hectare times the area available for residential development under the present Oakville official plan. Development, number three, development on OTMH lands must respect the existing character of the neighbourhood and adjacent heritage lands in accordance with livable Oakville, and we particularly quote sections 11, 11.1.9 and 26.1 and 2. In closing, you may be interested to know that TCRA held a community meeting 20th November 2013 to review all of these matters relating to this redevelopment. We held the meeting in Grace Lutheran Church as we could not find other accommodation in our area. The school was not available to us, although we did actually pursue that as a possibility. That's the same New Central School. Our attendance was estimated at between 150 and 160 people, and our questionnaire, which we gave to everyone after the meeting, we've currently had about 120 to 130 people respond to this questionnaire. We've not yet had time, unfortunately, to do a complete analysis of responses, but as soon as we will circulate it to those folks interested. However, based on an initial view, our community expresses strong support for the above three principles. In addition, there is support for seniors-friendly housing to allow what is, I believe, the correct term, aging in place for many of our seniors. In other words, we don't have to kick older people out of town to find accommodation that they can afford and live in. We did not note the support for apartments that the town reported from the public meetings which were held earlier. The support was very limited for apartments. In conclusion, the Coalition supports the deferral recommendation in the staff report, requests a mechanism for public input into the selection of a development model for the Chisholm, Brantwood and OTMH residential development, since we believe the community has a vested interest in the outcome of whichever model is selected. 3, would like public input into design options to take place before the design options are selected to allow community options in the mix. 4, requests that work on the community centre site be commenced as soon as reasonably possible with a view to early completion 2017-2018. And 5, expects that Livable Oakville section 2614A will be followed in redevelopment of the OTMH residential lands. Thank you for your time, and I'll be pleased to try and answer any questions you may have.
Thank you very much for your information, Dave. I don't have a question myself. Any members of council with questions? Thank you very much for coming tonight. I do have a question for staff. Of the requests that you heard, do any of them present you with any difficulty? I thought in your presentation that you had indicated that the consultations requested would happen as a matter of course. Could you just reaffirm that for the residents?
Yes, certainly. The presentations, a public consultation on the design detail would be happening as a matter of course. And as we said in the report, the community center, we'd be continually looking for the dates in which to deliver that. So I think all of that could be addressed as well. The models for requesting input on the models for disposal of the surplus school sites, Council had given us direction in April to proceed with implementation. We hadn't intended to bring a report back, but if they're looking for some input, we could look at a means in which to provide that. So I would think all of the recommendations that they've suggested are fine with staff.
Thank you very much. Councillor Demoff?
Only if you were done. Okay. It had to do with, in the report and also in the delegation, the contamination. Do we know this site is contaminated? And if so, who's paying to clean it up?
So the preliminary studies we have to date identified that there is a potential for contamination. Quite often on hospital sites, there's underground tanks that would have existed or other types of facilities that would have created some impact on the site. So the phase 1 work has indicated there is a potential. We need to go in and do the phase 2 work in order to be able to understand what that means. And that's actually doing some boreholes on the site. As I understand, in terms of the agreement with the hospital would turn the site over to the town as is. So if there's any contamination on the site, that would then become the town's responsibility.
So when they did the phase 1, did they find contamination? Because they do boreholes for the phase 1, right?
No, they don't. The phase 1 work is really a desktop exercise. It looks at all the previous uses that are on the site to see if there's any potential. And because of a hospital site itself, it raises a potential for contamination. So it flags it up, so then you need to go on to the on-site work as part of a phase 2.
So is the phase 2 environmental assessment underway right now?
No, it's not underway right now. What the hospital has indicated to us to do borehole testing on their site while they still have an active hospital is not a possibility. The MRI equipment and the other things can't withstand the impact of the boreholes. So we have not got that started. We have the terms of reference for one, and we'll start that as soon as possible, but not likely until 2016.
Okay, and the other question I had just had to do, the timing of the other sites is not tied to this site, is it?
No, it's not tied to this site. I think we had said in our staff report, we're looking at options for disposing of the site with two things: maximize the certainty in terms of what can happen on the site and the financial value, but they're completely separate from the OTMH site and from each other. They all proceed independently.
Thank you.
Okay, before I ask for a motion to receive the information, I just wondered, Mr. Mallon, would you be willing to come back? I did think of a question for you, but it's not from your presentation. Basically, I want to ask you about Brantwood's interim uses. Over the last couple of years, we've had various discussions at council and in committees and in public meetings about potential uses for Brantwood. As well, for some time now, I think coming on to at least half a year, the Lynn has expressed an interest in having a facility as part of the area after the hospital leaves that would be focused on assisting seniors to stay in their homes longer. The Lynn has expressed to us an interest in doing that sooner rather than waiting for 2017 at the earliest or 2020. In fact, in their recent inquiry of me, they wanted to know if they could start right away. I don't know what right away feels like in Lynn talk, but presumably it's way sooner than then. And the only idea I have for them for how they could start, let's call it now in commas, inverted commas, would be to use Brantwood temporarily, where temporary would stretch from now until when we build the new facility. What's your sense of the reaction of the community to keeping Brantwood back temporarily from redevelopment so that the Lynn could use it for this seniors facility for a few years. Would there be a problem, or would there be enthusiasm for that?
Your Worship, there is considerable concern in the community at the hospital moving, and specifically that has evidenced itself by way of strong interest in some kind of a health facility. I think it would relieve a great deal of stress and tension amongst the senior cohort in our community if they were to hear that there would be some kind of a healthcare facility at an early date. And I would suggest to you that would be the overriding concern of the community. The Lynn, as I currently understand it, can take a number of different forms, and it's not clear to us at this point exactly what it would consist of. Clearly, depending on what exactly the Lynn wants to be in this community, will depend on how well it fits into Brentwood and whether Brentwood is a suitable location. But there is no opposition to proceeding in that direction if, in fact, the Lynn would be appropriate for the school, and if there is sufficient parking for the Lynn, bearing in mind we would anticipate some parking needs, but it would depend very much what the Lynn specifically required. So provided it would fit, yes.
Thank you for that. Just to set your mind at ease, they're not talking about something that would involve people going to it so much as a place to house the services that go out to the homes where the seniors are remaining rather than moving to long-term care. So it's a long-term care avoidance scheme, and the various support programs that would help people stay in their homes longer need a home base out of which to operate, and that's what they're looking for in this instance. The reason I was prompted to ask you about it is because they've now, in the last few months, expressed their interest in this 3 times, and I think that means they might be serious.
Yes, quite understood. If we were able to get more details from you or from the Lynn as to what the requirements would be for this facility and what the offering would be for the facility, we'd be more than pleased to help in getting to the community and getting community feedback for you.
You're good to work with, and I'm sure we'll be able to do that as soon as they get more specific.
Thank you.
Thanks very much for your additional time. Council, could I have a motion to receive the information? Are there further delegations? I didn't see any, but thank you for reminding me. Councillor Byrd, were you moving receipt? Thank you. All those in favor? Opposed, if any, and that carries. Council, you have no confidential discussion items, but you do have your Heritage Oakville Advisory Committee report. I'll turn to Councillor Duddick, perhaps. Councillor Duddick moves the recommendation. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries. A motion to rise and report to Council would be in order now. Councillor Robinson, thank you. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? That carries. I rise and report the Committee of the Whole has met and made recommendations on consent items 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, public hearing item 6, discussion items 7, 8, 9, and 10, and the advisory committee minutes, item 11, as noted by the clerk. Could I have a mover and seconder for this report? Councillor Johnston and Councillor Lapworth. All in favor? Opposed, if any? The report is adopted. Councillors, is there any new business of an emergency, congratulatory, or condolence nature besides the one I moved forward from earlier this evening? And I congratulate Councillor Lowell again on his success. Councillor Duddick.
Just wanted to wish my fellow colleagues, Councillor Adams and Councillor Grant, a happy 10th anniversary on council.
Aw. Stand up and take a bow, boys.
And Councillor Duddick.
Oh, my goodness. Councillor Duddick, did you leave yourself out of that?
She did.
Speech. No, okay, fine. Well then, would any two of the three of you like to move and second the bylaws? Councillor Grant and Councillor Adams, thank you. This is the authority for the bylaws listed in the agenda as revised for number 113 and 132, as noted by the clerk. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? The bylaws are carried. Thank you very much for your time and attention. That completes our agenda. It's great working with you, and we are adjourned.